Hey friends, Paisleyandglue here, and I am on my 17th cup of coffee for the day. It's going great. Hi friends, it's Paisleyandglue here. It is 18 months into this project. The end is in sight. TBD, but the overdress is wearable, mostly. There's a couple key components missing, but generally it's all together. It fits me. I can move, I can sit, I can raise my arms above my head, all super important things. And let's talk about it. So where we left off in the first video, I was about to start Goldwork, I think. I kind of like put together the bodice-ish, put together the overskirt-ish, and then I needed to do all the Goldwork before I kind of move forward. So that's what I spent the next 6 months doing. It was a long time. It was a really long time. But it's done and I'm super happy with it. And she's very glittery now. She's like very glittery and even more glitter to add. So let's talk about what I did for the last 3 months or so. Also, can we talk about the static electricity in my studio and just like in winter in the Midwest, because it's like a problem. Like it's bad. Like everything sticks to everything else and it makes me crazy.
So here you can see me thread tracing the panels for the skirt Goldwork. I traced the design on the broadcloth with transfer paper, and now I'm using thread to mark my design on the front of the fabric so I can see it when I'm embroidering. This is how I set up my scroll frame for the Goldwork embroidery. Usually Goldwork is done on large flat frames, but because this piece is so long and skinny, I decided to use this scroll frame, which generally worked pretty well, except that I got creases in the taffeta where the clamp sat. Tension is key in Goldwork and really any kind of embroidery, so I wrapped the pink ribbon around the sides of the frame to keep the fabric as taut as possible. I started doing this Goldwork embroidery last spring, and it took me about 200 hours to complete all the motifs for the skirt and the bodice. There are almost 40 motifs, and every one is unique. So, because it was my project during TV time, I didn't film really any of it except this one, as I was nearing the end of the process. Goldwork was a new skill for me, and I definitely have a lot of improvements to make, but it is really fun to incorporate into your embellishments. It really adds so much depth and texture into this dress. I am glad that it is done now, though. I really couldn't make any more progress on the dress until I finished all of this Goldwork. So I'm working on getting the skirt panel pieces kind of together, ready to go on. So when I had been marking these out, I left this length to turn back and be a facing on the inside of the overskirt. But I didn't really think about how I would want a piece of trim here. So what I'm going to end up doing is stitching. Get in your home. Stitching this trim down to the stitch line and then doing like a little tuck behind. So it'll end up being a tuck on this side, stitching along that, and that will end up sandwiching the trim in that tuck, which will then become the edge of the skirt. And it will all fold over like that. So it'll look like that on the front, and then like that on the back. And so I will start by stitching on this to the front of the skirt, and then we'll turn back the facing
And then I'll probably end up hand whipping, turning back all this excess on the facing and like hand whipping that down so that it looks clean from this side. And then remember, we have that black organza flat lining to the overskirt that you'll see beyond that. So yeah, that's what we're doing. And then we can start putting this overskirt together. All right, we're at a very exciting moment. I'm getting ready to stitch the decorative trim down the front of the skirt. So what I've done, now this is going to make a little bit more sense. I thread traced my stitch line all the way down the front so I could see where that was. And then I'm pinning my trim on to that line. I'm going to stitch that. And then this will flip over. And that will fold back. And then this will become the facing on the back of the skirt. And I'll trim away all that broadcloth flat lining. And then probably hand stitch down the facing to the back of this. And then pull that thread tracing out. But then that'll be a nice clean facing so that we don't immediately see this organza on the back of the skirt if the front flips open a little bit. And then the skirt will kind of be done, and I can think about putting a hem in it.
After the gold work was applied to the skirt panels, I could mark the hem. I put the skirt on a dress form over the petticoat and the pocket hoops and measured an even line around the entire skirt. Then I moved it to my table and pinned the excess up. I left the wide hem intact so it hides the organza layer and serves as a very wide facing on the hem when it is in the polonaise form of the dress. Then I used the same manner as the petticoat to sew the hem up by stitching the edge of the facing to only the organza layer to avoid any hem stitches on the front of the skirt. I attached the goldwork panels to the bodice in much the same manner as the skirt and stitched this gold trim onto the seam edge. Then I used bias tape to bind off the seam allowance, encasing half the gold trim within the seam so it became a decorative edge to the bodice. I then graded out the layers, and this means cutting the various layers of the fabric within a seam at different lengths to make a seam lay more flat and reduce the bulk. Then I understitched the edge of the bias tape and whip stitched the tape down to the inside of the bodice.
All right. So this week I got the facing on to the skirt, which is pretty exciting. It's ready to be slip stitched to just organza so we don't see it on the other side. I also went ahead and did the hem, which was perhaps slightly premature, but I was just too excited and I just wanted to get it done. But I have this nice wide facing on the hem, so if anything flips up, especially once it's in its sort of final polonaise form, we won't see the organza on the bottom. Yeah, so I just need to slip stitch this all down. And then the skirt is kind of ready. Well, that's not true. I need to do my sort of like serpentine pleated decoration piece here. So I need to do that first before I do the sort of final pleat up of the skirt. I also have started thinking about the ruffles for the sleeve. I've got two different kinds of chiffon here. So I think it's purple on the outside and green on the inside, or maybe vice versa. I forget now what the sketch looks like. It's the opposite. So I'm going to go ahead and probably do a little mock-up for this to make sure I know how long I want them to be and get those rocking.
So I have completed a version of, I think, what the lace is going to look like for the Engageantes. And I was kind of experimenting. I used a different color bobbin on the bottom to see if I liked a lighter color thread on the purple or a slightly off color from the purple. And I think I like this better. So I'm going to use sort of a fuchsia-y, pinky color that is a little different than the purple. So the way I did this on the chiffon was I used this wash away stitch stabilizer, and this stuff is really cool. It is sheets of paper. You can print on them. I'm just drawing on them, but you could print a more complicated design, and then you just peel the sticker back away and just stick it straight to the fabric and then stitch through it, and then it washes away in warm water so that you are left with just your embroidered design. This would be a nightmare to try to embroider without some sort of stabilizer. And this is much easier than a tearaway kind. So I kind of came up with using the machine embroidery stitches on my machine, on my home machine. I kind of made this lace design that kind of is sort of oldie-timey looking. I used the scallop stitch for the edge, and then I'm going to use a little bit of fray block and then cut away the excess after it's stitched. And then did a couple different decorative stitches that I thought looked kind of witchy. And then there's this subtle eyeball design in the lace. And I haven't decided yet. I may end up cutting out the center of the eyeball, which I think might be cool. TBD. But this is actually going to be on the green. So this design's going on the green, and then the purple, which sticks out just a little bit on the bottom, is going to be just a slightly simpler design. So here I'm drawing the scalloped edge of the Engageantes onto the stabilizer and generally drawing out the design onto the paper before sticking them to the chiffon. I have a fair number of nice embroidery stitches on my sewing machine, and by combining them together, I was able to get an interesting embroidered effect on my Engageantes. Not as precise as an actual embroidery machine, and it was annoying that I had to sit there and guide the machine, but it worked pretty well. I do like the combination of the stitches, and I was able to create some cool shapes like that subtle eyeball design. After finishing the embroidery, a quick dunk in some warm water dissolved the paper and all of the residue.
Ugh, sleevils. Literally the worst. So I've been messing around with the sleeves all afternoon. Basically, when it's on a dress form, my dress form is slightly, like measurement wise, it says it's the same as me, but it's not actually. So it looks like on the dress form that the sleeves were in the right place. And then when I put them on my body, they were like super torqued this way. And I was getting like those sort of drag marks, but like when my arm was relaxed. So I took them off and I've kind of been messing around with this all afternoon. I think that I'm at a point where it's kind of as good as it's going to get because, you know, we still want movement, of which I have that. Trying just mostly not to hit things in my studio. This cap is looking pretty smooth. I'm getting a little bit of drag lines here, but I think that just happens because it's taffeta. So like it's never going to be completely smooth because of the nature of the fabric. And you need enough fabric under here to be able to extend your arm all the way up. So if I cut away any of that, then I would not be able to do this because of physics and how arms work. I'm kind of thinking about also basically my shoulders tend to like roll forward. So thinking about my posture and how I need to be standing up straighter. It's really hard to film this on myself. You can see that I've got the motif so that it pretty much goes straight up the outside of my arm, which is what I'm going for. And then all the fullness is towards the back of the sleeve. And then I have, again, good range of motion this way. I am going to cut up this armhole a little bit. I had decided not to do a little tuck because I didn't want that line, but then I was getting a lot of like collapsing here. So I'm just going to bring up this curve so that it just sort of clears that part of my forearm, and then that will kind of lay a lot flatter. So generally, like when my arms are out and I'm sort of like resting them on the pocket hoops, I think that's sort of how this will look. And so we kind of lose a lot of that fullness. I also think that just due to the shape of my arm, probably a two-piece sleeve is a better choice all around for me. You're always going to be able to get a better fit there. It's not, I mean, there were kind of two-piece sleeves then, usually not these shorter sleeves though. Also, I've already done this embroidery and I'm not doing it again. So here we are. That's the left sleeve, kind of okay. Right sleeve is looking a little bit more tortured still. I need to kind of like unpick everything. I'm taking a little bit out of the back. I don't think I can get that in video. I'm taking a little bit out of the back sleeve seam. So I need to do that on both of them. And then I just want to talk about how, even though this like looks like it fits my dress form, it does close. Obviously the stays are not on underneath it like they are when I'm wearing it. But you can see how differently that sleeve hangs than when it's on me because of how my arms are attached to my body. That sleeve is like super skewing to the back. Definitely not how it should look. And it's not how it does look on my body. But that's why when I tried to set them when I was just on my dress form, it did not look good. So just, you know, it's not easy to fit on yourself. It was sort of like pin, take it off, pin, take it off, pin, take it off. But I eventually got, I think, to a good place. If you can have someone help you, it's a little easier. Here we are. So I am done cheering up my new armscye line. So I just wanted to show kind of what happened there. The blue line is my old armscye line and the white line is the new one. So if we start over here, we can see that I'm taking out a little bit on the back arm just to kind of cinch it into my upper arm a little bit more. And then we can see I actually raised it up kind of as high as possible going around the top of the arm. So this is the old line and this is my new line. And then similarly coming around the whole thing. And I think that is going to, I had actually raised this up already before to give myself more movement, but I think when I did that, that I didn't add to the top of the shoulder cap. And you can't really do that because then I was getting some drag lines under the arms. And while those are not completely gone because of how these sleeves were cut in one, there's always going to be sort of like a built-in gusset in the sleeves to allow for that movement. You know, a normal sleeve would sort of cut down like this, but since we have this extra height here, which allows me to raise my arms over my head, it also will sort of always cause a certain amount of kind of folds under the arm. And that's just kind of the way that is, and that's okay. But I think this is going to be better. We're moving forward.
Moving on to the final piece of skirt trim. I cut bias strips of this pretty two-toned dupioni and then sewed them together into one long strip. I tapered the ends so the strips started out at 3 inches at the top and finished at 5 inches at the bottom. Then I turned back the edges at 1/2 inch and used my machine to stitch a gold embroidered design along the edge to give it a little bit of interest. After the embroidery was done, I used the historical sewing method of making gathered bias strips, and after folding these strips in half, I whip stitched along the fold and then carefully gathered up the strips in order to make a gathered trim.
So I gathered up on my trim and then I pressed it flat, well, not pressed it flat, but used the iron and some steam to sort of train it so it stayed open. But then I decided that it just wasn't wonderful enough. So I'm adding this this lace trim to the back of it to kind of give it just a little bit more depth. But of course it wasn't wide enough. So I did cut a bias strip of organza, and then I'm going to attach, or I did attach the lace to the edge of the organza. And now I'm just going to do a quick running stitch to attach those two layers together and then attach it to the overskirt. And I also think that I'm going to add this trim around the top of the sleeve hem to finish that off, and then the engageantes will come out the bottom of that. So here's where I currently stand on Madame. The dress is pretty much together. So I've got the trim on the sleeves. I've got the engageant stitched in. I made a belt out of a bias strip of dupioni. I had this fun buckle already, so that was nice. And then I have not... This is skirt hooks here on the stomacher. Hard to do with one hand. So it's stitched in to one side, and then the stomacher has hooks and bars across. This is how the skirt currently is. So it's on a grosgrain tape with a hook and bar. I will stitch this tape into the inside of the bodice, and I'll cross stitch it in to just this back flat lining broadcloth so you can't see it, because otherwise I think that it'll slip down and we'll see this grosgrain. Normally in period construction, it would actually be stitched along the edge here, but I don't want to have that stitch line. So in theater, usually this is how we do it. We put the skirt on a tape and then we stitch the tape into the bodice like so. And you can see this had to drop down a little bit because the skirt is at an angle, and that's how the bodice comes over the front anyway. And then the idea when it's on me is that the lines of trim match up. So I'm feeling real good about this. Got the trim on the underskirt as well. I also went ahead and used some spray starch on the pleats here to hard set them and also kind of give this just a little bit more body. It was just like a little floofy. It probably needs like one more press because they're just a little curly. Used to like press and then sit on a flat surface to dry completely, which I didn't do. And yeah, so pretty much done with the overdress. I do need to make the collar piece that's going to sit inside here. I'm not doing that for this event that I'm hoping to go to later this month. So that won't happen. I do also need to do the tapes from the inside of the waist to keep the polonaise skirt up. It'll look like that. So that will be just a tape from the inside of the waistband. And then there will be a little button on the inside of the skirt here that will attach to that tape. But other than that, she's looking real cute. Okay, pals, so that's it for today. I'm starting the wig. It's a lot. It's a lot. I'm excited and scared, just like Into the Woods. Excited and scared. Excited and scared. Here's the wig. Love the color. It's real pretty. This is my hairline. So I'm filling in the hairline with some extra colors and some extra hair. And then I have to build whatever sort of cage situation I'm going to do to make the thing. So that will be the next video. Stay tuned. I will see you all next time. Thanks for sticking along with this incredibly long build. Make good choices. Remember who you are. Watch your caffeine intake or don't. It's